so feel free to grab those. So with no further ado, although I shortchanged Scott, I should probably explain. Scott was an environmental lawyer before he got into politics. He resigned from San Diego City Council. He served on the Port Commission. And Scott, am I right? Are you in your 5th term now? Yeah, 5th term in Congress. Doing a great job representing not just Coronado, but all of the San Diego area. He knows the military is important, and as a result, we've asked him to come and talk a little bit about what's being done nationally on climate change as it affects the military and national defense. Scott, I'll turn things over to you.
Thanks, Brian. By the way, just speaking of the military, obviously they've had a difficult week this week, and hope you'll keep those folks in your prayers. They sign up to do some pretty heroic things, and sometimes they actually get called on to make the ultimate sacrifice. So let's not forget that today. I want to tell you a story talking about the military and their orientation. And when I was first elected, and thanks again for your support. I don't know if you ever thought Coronado would have a Democrat representative in Congress, but they feel that way in Conway too. So the scheduler says the commandant wants to meet you. I said, great, we'll meet him. And he said, okay, well, he set a date, and then all of a sudden I realized, the commandant of the Marines is coming to meet me, and he comes into my office, and it was General Amos at the time. He brought also with him all these other generals. So you've seen this, but these guys are fully stacked with all this, that's why they call them the Marine brass, right? The brass. Right? And they sit down on my table. I'm thinking, hey, that's pretty cool. I'm like a brand new freshman member of Congress, member of the Ways and Means Committee. The commandant wants to talk to me. What's he want to talk about? Budgeting, sequester, foreign relations. He says, Congressman, I said, yes, sir. He said, I want to talk to you about solar energy. And in my inside voice, I said, hey, it's your meeting, dude. But outside, I said, yes, sir. And he explained to me that one of the most dangerous things that the Marines were doing was moving large amounts of petroleum across the desert from one place to another place. When those convoys were attacked, we lost soldiers and Marines. So he said, I'm not using generators for our stations now. I'm using solar panels. I've got solar panels on backpacks now that power small appliances, actually way less than the batteries we used to make our troops carry. And I'm looking for a way to do desalination using solar power so we don't have to rely on the hospitals for our water supply. And he sort of gave me the speech, like, if you try to take the solar panels out of my hands, it was like the Charlton Heston's cold dead hands are the guns. He was very attached to this. And it wasn't because he was a tree hugger. It was because there was a mission that was fulfilled by the use of these renewable energies. And this has always been the thing about the military. I want you to remember, it's just Coronado is the center of the Navy and the Marines, or the Navy, is that the Navy has always been the leading innovator on energy. We went from sails on ships to coal to nuclear, and they're doing another generation of innovation too. So under Secretary Mavis in the Obama administration, he decided to launch a number of initiatives to get the military, the Navy, to half renewable. Again, why was it? Well, the Department of Defense is the largest consumer of fossil fuels in the world. And what would happen is when the price of petroleum would go up, they still had to buy the petroleum, but that meant they had to reorient their whole mission because now they had to take resources from someone else that they paid for fuel. So they got the idea that if we could be less dependent on those power sources, we could have a more certainty about our mission. So under President Obama and Secretary Mavis, now half of the power for the land bases on the West Coast is provided by solar energy under a contract with Sempra and SDG&E that powers them from a place in Arizona. They've developed the Great Green Fleet, which we launched out here on North Island, where they're using biofuels as part of the fuel mix. Actually, the ones that we started was with derived from beef fat. So I told my wife, "Let me have this steak. It's patriotic." And they've also developed some ships that run like a hybrid car, so that up to a certain speed they go on electric, and after that they use conventional fuel. And it's a huge success story. Again, it's not because the Navy's tree huggers, it's because they have a mission. And that's, I think, the way the military can teach us about energy. I was on my first 2 terms I spent on the Armed Services Committee. I aspired to be on the Energy and Commerce Committee, which is one of the 3 so-called exclusive committees, along with Appropriations and Ways and Means. So you had to compete for it. I was able to get that seat in my 3rd term. And I signed up for the Energy Subcommittee and the Environment and Climate Subcommittee. So I'm the number 2 Democrat now in energy. And so you should know, by the way, that my first job is to represent San Diego, okay? So that means thinking about the economies that power us, whether it's tourism, which needed a lot of support during the pandemic and needs a clean ocean, whether it's the border trade, where we built a wonderful new facility down in San Ysidro you can all be proud of as taxpayers, that both conveys trade and protects in terms of security. Whether it's the military, which is 20% of our jobs, in addition to being a proud partner in the national defense, we rely on those investments. Getting a brand new SEALs training facility that's almost done, that actually I think looks pretty nice. And the innovation economy, whether it's the fact that Qualcomm's here, or biotechnology, or a lot of startups. I pay attention to that first, but my national issue is environment and climate. I do, as Brian said, practice environmental law. And I think nationally we have a lot of opportunities. So in addition to the speaker before, who talked about local opportunities, in Congress I'm trying to work on national opportunities. One is just to say the thing I said before about the military, which is we don't want to get in their way. Sometimes there was some efforts by some of the representatives who may have been from Texas and Oklahoma to make sure we didn't spend a single dime on renewable fuels. They were even incrementally more expensive. But we were able to fight that fight and win that fight with a few Republicans, even during the Obama administration when we were in the minority. So they've continued that mission. They've also continued to remind us that that from a threat standpoint, the climate change effects are a big risk to us. What we're going to see is more destabilization. It's a theory, I think probably likely, that what's happened in Syria is a result of drought. And that creates a lot of refugees. We're going to see sea level rise that's going to affect literally millions and millions and millions of people who are going to become climate refugees. That is all a threat multiplier for the military. So in addition to making sure that we're taking care of their bases and looking out for sea level rise, which will happen here, but it's really happening in Virginia a lot right now, they're also thinking of strategic implications of climate change. So it's a really good institution to have interested in climate because it's still the most credible, it's still the most trusted institution among Americans. But it's also hard for Republicans to talk back to generals. If they can talk back to President Biden, but it's hard for them to talk back when an admiral or a general gets up there and says, "Hey, this is a real problem." So on the committee that I'm on now, let me just, if I could, just say a couple things that I'm working on. I have taken a particular interest in something called short-lived climate pollutants, and I know some of you know what that is, but methane, black carbon, and hydrofluorocarbons are short-lived climate pollutants, not like carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide sits in the atmosphere for a long time, and as we generate carbon dioxide through power production or through cars, that material sits out there for a long time, and it takes a long time for it to go away. Short-lived climate pollutants have a bad side and a good side. The bad side is that they're about 80 times more powerful than carbon dioxide in the short run. So they are the cause right now. People say that methane itself is about 25% of the reason for the warming that's happening right now. But the good thing about them is that they don't last long; they go away fast. So if you can get these things out of the mix, you can really slow the rate of climate change. While we continue to work on the carbon dioxide issues, which we said we have 10 years to do. That's only true if we deal with methane and things like that. So on hydrofluorocarbons, you should know that we passed one of the most consequential environmental protection measures at the end of last year in a bipartisan way. We snuck it into the spending program at the end because the cooling industry was for it. They saw other countries stepping up and getting rid of these hydrofluorocarbons and going to substitutes in a way that if we didn't do it, our own industries didn't do it, we would lose competitive advantage. So that helped get Republicans on board, and Democrats who are concerned about climate. Huge win for us to meet the Montreal protocols. Good news. Now I'm working on methane, and you may have seen that I sponsored the bill to restore the methane rules from the Obama administration, which we passed, and I got a nice signing ceremony with President Biden, who, by the way, I wouldn't want to manage his schedule. He's the chattiest dude you ever met. He wants to sit around afterward and talk about everybody, about Ireland and infrastructure. But that was quite an honor, and methane comes mostly from leakages along the natural gas system. So whether it's at the fracking point, or during transmission in pipelines, or distribution to the homes here where you use gas stoves, the leaks there release methane. And while natural gas burns more cleanly than coal, that's certainly true by 40%. If you lose a lot of methane along the way, you lose almost all the climate benefit of switching from coal to natural gas. So we've got to close up those loops. We got the old Obama standards back. I'm working on performance standards that are much more possible now that we have really good detection technologies. And I actually made a speech in Houston at the Petroleum Institute saying to the industry, you've got to get your act together. And that's a big focus of mine. I don't think that's going to happen this year. But I think there's progress on it. I think the industry understands where it's going. And if they want to make any argument that natural gas is part of the mix, they have to deal with methane. The other thing I want to just call your attention to is black carbon, which we used to say came mostly from incomplete combustion of diesel. A lot of it's from shipping. And at the port, they've tried to switch to cold ironing, basically plugging it into the electric system, which would be great. But it's really coming a lot from wildfires now. And I just want to say, this has got to be a big focus of ours as environmentalists, as well as Californians. We know that wildfires are more intense because of climate change, that the conditions in forests are dry, it's a lot of fuel. And so to protect people's homes, and we have to do firefighting, we have to do more thinning. But the other reason to do that is because it throws off a lot of carbon pollution. Short-lived climate pollutants of black carbon are really very, very damaging for climate change. And I think that the infrastructure bill that was passed in a bipartisan way, and what we add to it as Democrats to the budget and reconciliation has to deal with that, and that's going to be the main focus of mine. Finally, I just say it's really good to have Joe Biden as president. If you had told me that the president would lead us to a bipartisan infrastructure deal worth $1 billion, you said that to me during the Obama administration, I mean, we weren't even thinking about those numbers. It would be historic just to pass this, and there's a lot of really good stuff in it. And then we have the opportunity, we should pass it. I'm for passing it right now, by the way.
Right now.
I think it would be a huge win. I have to say that there's a lot of people who want to leverage that on their own party to do something really big on the other end. And I would say as Democrats, we understand that bipartisan deal doesn't do everything, but we need to get the president that win, and then let's decide what else we have to do. So you've heard about $3.5 trillion that Senator Sanders and the Budget Committee came up with. You may not be surprised that not every Democrat in the Senate agrees with that. What we're trying to do is make sure that the Senate lets us know what the real number is, because it's not just Sinema and Manchin. Sinema says there's a bunch of guys hiding under her skirts, which is true. That they are also concerned about the size of it. They want to make sure it's paid for. We want to talk about what we want to do. Great. Whatever we could do, I think even if it's $2 billion or $1 billion in addition to that thing. I mean, think about the size. I mean, it's trillions. What is it? 2 trillion or a trillion? Think about the size of that and the transformation that this could do. So that's going to be our job in the next few months. And the one thing that we've agreed we will borrow for, because Nancy and the president, the speaker and the president both want to be paid for, but we can borrow to deal with the climate crisis, which if we don't act will cost us a lot. So we're really set up well to do well. I think it will be tense. There will be a lot of as Democrats, we always set up a circular firing squad and say use things about each other. I think at the end we're going to come up with something great, and climate will be a real focus. So I love the efforts that you're doing locally. I'm aware I'm a senior mayor more than I'm used to seeing it. So that's good. Someone's going to do it. Someone's going to run. And you know, I seem like a decent guy. But so you'll tell me more.